Get lumped up tonight. Listen to Rob Rossi and Rock a Mine on the only podcast that I'll hear that won't make me wanna rip off my ears. Oh, the Rock Show, the Rock Show, the Rock Show, the Rock Show, the Rock Show. The Rock Show, oh, I want the Rock Show. The Rock Show, 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 the Rock Show.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 171 of the Rock Show podcast. I'm Rocker Mike. The big guy to my left there is Rob Rossi. Oh, Rob. And today we're talking about the second part of our Willy DeVille podcast. Now, we talked last 2 weeks ago about everything, basically the Mink DeVille years from 75 to about 86.
Yeah, that's with the band, right?
Right, when he had a band called Mink DeVille, Willy DeVille was a singer, guitar player, songwriter. Basically, he was the band. And in the last few years of its existence, he really was the band. He had fired all the original singers at that original players at that point, musicians, right? The original lineup, and he had been recording. Things were very well in Europe, doing very well, not quite making it in America. But he wanted to make a change, okay? So in 1986, he decided to retire the Mink DeVille name and just go by the name of Willy DeVille, which is where we're at today. Yep, that's him right there. And
before you get started, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
So we've been seeing this pattern, as many shows as we've done, we see this pattern that a lot of guys don't make it to the U.S. and then they go to Europe and they're like rock star. It's like that still boggles my mind. That why does that happen? It's the taste. It's like they just want Americans there. I don't understand it. What is it? What do you think is that?
Well, you know, people that in America that aren't in the mainstream. Okay, in Europe, the listening, the people listening to this stuff, they like that. Okay, they like these kind of outsider people. Okay, they find them interesting, and they are. Okay, also a lot of like someone like Willy, who was doing this, you know, different kind of roots American music than anybody else was doing at the time. He wasn't really in sync with popular music or anything like that. In Europe, they like that, and they like roots American music a lot more than we do as Americans. Okay, you know, stuff like 50s style rockabilly and stuff is huge in Europe, especially England, France, places like that. They like that. Okay, even now, 2022. Okay, there is a large rock and roll scene in places like France. Okay, Italy. They dress the part. You know, they wear the tight jeans and the jackets and, you know, all that stuff. And, you know, it's cool. Okay. And these American musicians are usually well received in Europe if they're doing something different, I find.
You know what? The other place that happened to them, even though they're not South America, they love that shit. They eat it up.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, if you're into like, you know, punk rock, heavy metal, things like that. That stuff is huge in South America. You know, I'm from Queens, and I would see South American, you know, guys from, you know, Paraguay or something wearing Ramon shirts in on Roosevelt Avenue, you know, and you talk to them and they know the band. It's not just a fashion thing, you know. They
you know what's the funny thing that always cracked me up? Some of these guys speak a lick of English, but they can sing a whole remote song.
The whole song. Yep. Figure that out. But it goes back to what you're saying, Rob. You know, these guys, they go to Europe and they make their money there. Mentioning the Ramones, I mean, the last few years of the Ramones' existence, they made a fortune touring South America.
Wow.
I mean, more than they ever made anywhere else. They would fill soccer stadiums, 50,000 people. Okay.
Right. That's impressive.
And here they're playing clubs, you know,
Yeah.
so figure that out. Okay. But getting back to Willy, in 1987, he started recording and touring under his name, Willy DeVille.
Yeah.
Mink DeVille was totally put to rest. He began at that point a collaboration, which would be probably his most successful, with Mark Knopfler of Dire Straits.
Okay.
Okay. The result was an album by Willy DeVille called Miracle. Produced in London by Mark Knopfler, the collaboration was the brainchild of Knopfler's wife. Her name is Lourdes. She was very aware that Mark was a fan, okay, and suggested, you know, you should do an album with him. So the album was a collection of kind of leftover songs that Willy had gone back to over the years. Nothing that he had recorded before, just stuff that was lying around. One new track was called Spanish Jack, and it was co-written by Mark Knopfler. That was a new one. But the album closer, the last song on the album, was a song called Storybook Love. And it would become one of Willy's most well-known songs because it became the theme to the successful movie The Princess Bride.
Yes, it did.
And it was nominated for an Academy Award, and Willy got to perform it at the Oscars. Okay?
That's huge.
Yeah. Now, you know, what we may not realize is there's the Grammys, and that's great. It's great to win a Grammy, okay? But if your song is nominated for an Oscar, it's even higher honor. So it was a very big deal for him. He was very moved that he was asked to perform. Unfortunately, he didn't win anything because Dirty Dancing took everything that year. Okay, but it was still great exposure for Willy DeVille, especially at that point in his career where he was really trying to go off as just a solo musician. Now, in '88,
when you hit the Academy Award, you're also reaching like a whole new audience. There are people that never knew who the hell you were, and now you're like in front of all these people.
Exactly. That's what I mean by exposure. Okay, you know, the exposure that he got. And in those days, it isn't like now where the Oscars get low ratings. Okay, in those days, 1988, everybody was watching the Oscars, even
everybody.
Me. I don't even watch no more, you know. But everybody did back then. The whole world was watching, really. So he got to perform that with Mark Knopfler on the Academy Awards. It was a big moment. In 1988, though, Willy would move from New York City down to New Orleans. He found it now as kind of his spiritual home. He was very just intrigued by the city and decided to move there, moved into the French Quarter. He immersed himself into the whole culture of the city, the Creole culture in particular. Now, after about 2 years of doing that, kind of absorbing the city, he would release a tribute album of New Orleans music called Victory Mixture. Victory Mixture. It was basically a mix of soul and R&B and everything that the city had to offer in that genre, jazz influences. The album was recorded using no overdubs at all, totally live. Okay. They basically were recording old traditional New Orleans songs in the way that it was recorded years ago. They didn't do any overdubs. It was just live. Whatever take they was good, you know, that was what they would use. They didn't fix anything. Victory Mixture was released on the indie label Orleans Records, okay, which released it also to FNAC Records in France. It went gold, selling over 100,000 copies in Europe pretty quickly, okay. Carlo Ditta, who was the producer of the album and founder of Orleans Records, was very proud of that. That was the biggest thing he had ever put out. Now, in the summer of 1992, DeVille toured Europe with Dr. John, Johnny Adams, Zachary Richard, and the Wild Magnolias as part of his New Orleans Review tour. Okay. One guy at this time, unfortunately, who they would cross paths with would be Johnny Thunders in New Orleans. Do you remember the story?
Yeah.
Okay. Thunders went down to New Orleans. Well, I wouldn't say they crossed paths because Willie, the story goes, is Willie didn't even know he was in town. But Willie lived up the street from the St. Peter Inn where Johnny Thunders had died. And, he became part of the story, that he saw him come out, being brought out, his body being brought out. He didn't even know he was in town. But Thunders was there to, make a name for himself in the New Orleans scene. And Willie was just starting to really do that. So these guys knew each other. So I'm sure Willie might have been on Johnny's mind to contact about being in a band or getting something going.
Yeah,
I'm just assuming. I don't know if that's true, but it seems like knowing that might be the case, knowing they were part of the New York scene and both being down there.
One of them would have reached out to the other one if they knew they were there. They probably would have been like, "Hey,
I'm sure if Thunders had lived, Willie would have known and reached out to him and say, "Hey, do some shows together or something."
Yep.
Wow. Now, the New Orleans Review tour that Willie was on in 92, was very grueling. Touring in Europe, especially in those days, was very difficult. It's not much better now from what I understand. They don't have like 4-star hotels. They don't have places like that. Okay. You stay in like little inns and bed and breakfast type things. And, you're lucky sometimes you don't have hot water, things like that, So, but despite it being a grueling tour, it was very successful. At the end of every show, the band would throw out Mardi Gras beads into the audience. And that was something that nobody had ever seen before in Europe. So they really liked that. Now, also in 1992, DeVille recorded Backstreets of Desire, the first of 4 albums he would record in Los Angeles with producer John Philip Shinelli. Willie hated Los Angeles with a passion. He hated being there. He hated recording there. But New Orleans had a lack of good recording studios. So he would end up going out to L.A. to record. But when he did, he often never left the hotel room other than to record. He didn't like the city. For Backstreets of Desire, he was joined by David Hidalgo of Los Lobos, Efrain Toro, Mariachi Los Comparos, and Jimmy Zavala. They were a great lineup of Latin artists from L.A. Dr. John played piano on that album, and Zydeco artist. Zydeco is a type of New Orleans music. Artist Zachary Richard, along with LA session guys Jeff Baxter, Freebo, Jim Gilstrap, and Brian Ray would round out the clientele for this album. The album is
something strange. I never realized how much Dr. John played with Willy DeVille.
Yeah,
Dr. John never.
He was very good friends with him. Very good friends with him.
So he would just call him up and, "Hey, can you play?" He pretty much was playing the piano, I guess, all the time.
Yeah, well, that's what he's known for. Okay, and Dr. John, who had his own career, he would take time off from that to Willie. So that's a big, it's a big thing.
That's what I'm thinking. That's huge.
Yeah, I mean, and of course now you're down in Dr. John's town. Okay, so he's gonna turn you on to everything down there, which he did.
Yeah.
Now this album called Backstreets of Desire is considered one of Willie's best. It's a roots rock and roll, doo-wop, Crescent City influenced kind of thing. It has some Spanish soul mixed in there with the artists that he was playing with. There's a mariachi version of the Jimi Hendrix made famous song, Hey Joe. Okay. That was a hit in Europe and went to #1 actually in Spain and France, that version of Hey Joe. Backstreets of Desire was released in the U.S. in 1994 on Rhino Records' Forward label. Now, back in 1984, before the move to New Orleans, Willie married his second wife, Lisa Leggett. Now, he had divorced toots at that point. Lisa became his manager, and on the strength of his successful tours and European selling albums, they were able to buy a horse farm in Picayune, Mississippi. And they would split their time between the French Quarter in New Orleans and the farm in Mississippi. Now, Lisa also got into horse breeding, but through the mid-90s, Willy didn't have an American record contract. He would release Willy DeVille Live in 1993 and Big Easy Fantasy in 1995, both for the French label FNAC. Excuse me. The live album there went to #1 in Spain. Big Easy Fantasy was some live recordings of the Mink DeVille band playing with New Orleans legends Eddie Bo and the Wild Magnolias. It also featured some remixes of tracks from Victory Mixture. So he used some older tracks when Mink DeVille still existed and everything. This record is kind of a mishmash, but it's a good album. In 95, Willy would return to L.A. to record Loup Garou, one of my personal favorites, once again with producer Jean-Philippe Chenali. The title in French means werewolf, Loup Garou. The album continued with experiments in mariachi, Cajun style, mixed with rock and roll. A highlight of the album, and also a personal highlight for Willy, was the duet You'll Never Know he did with Brenda Lee. The album also delved into country with the track No Such Pain as Love. The track Still I Love You Still was shot as a video in New Orleans Preservation Hall, to be exact, which is like the oldest jazz club in the country. Okay, it's over 100 years old. The album cover was a photo of Willy DeVille standing in front of Jean Lafitte's blacksmith shop, said to be the oldest bar in the U.S. on the corner of Bourbon and St. Philip Street. But the title track, Loup Garou, with its tribal voodoo drums, showed just how immersed in New Orleans culture Willy was. Probably thanks to Dr. John as well. Yep, that's where it is. No, with the Willy DeVille acoustic trio. Nope, different record, but very similar album, Loup Garou.
Okay.
Yeah. But then, things would soon change now at this point. In 1999, before a major move to the American Southwest, he would record the album Horse of a Different Color in Memphis. Produced by Jim Dickinson, which included the Chain Gang song, a cover of Fred McDowell's Going Over the Hill, and a cover of Andre Williams' Bacon Fat. This record was the first since 1987's Miracle that got simultaneously released in America and Europe. So finally, he's got an American record contract.
Yeah.
Now, by the year 2000, DeVille had cured himself of his 20-year heroin addiction.
Wow.
He relocated to Gorillos Hills, New Mexico, where he would produce and play on an album called Blue Love Monkey with Rick Naffy. Naffy was a friend from his youth time in Connecticut and had played in his first band, Billy and the Kids, as well as the Royal Pythons. He was in that as well. In New Mexico, Willy's second wife, Lisa, committed suicide. She hung herself. And he actually found her, which is horrible. Okay. This was the beginning of a very turbulent time in his life. He began to really decline health-wise after this. He walked with a cane because the years of addiction had messed with his hip bones and stuff, and he needed a hip replacement surgery, which wouldn't happen until about 2006. So he walked with a cane for a while, and he would sometimes perform sitting on a bar stool on stage. Okay. His arrival into the Southwest really piqued an interest in his Native American heritage. On the cover of the next album, 2002's acoustic trio Live in Berlin, recorded to celebrate his 25 years of performing, DeVille wore his hair long, and he began to wear Native American jewelry on stage. Around that time. He was wearing like jewelry and stuff, and there's others with he's got more beads on and things like that. In 2004, DeVille returned to Los Angeles to record the album Crow Jane Alley. It was his third album with producer John Philip Chenali. The album continued his explorations of Spanish-American sounds and featured many Los Angeles Latino musicians once again. On the album cover, Willy wore a Native American headdress and breastplate. This album featured the dark track Downside of Town, where Willy sings a lyric about cutting her down, which is a clear reference to his late wife's suicide. Yeah, it's a strong record full of self-reflection, remorse, love, and optimism. Shiva, Chiva is a track about his heroin addiction. Okay. He covers brilliantly Brian Ferry's Slave to Love and Jay and the Americans Come a Little Bit Closer. I think that Brian Ferry version is better than Brian Ferry, to be honest with you.
Wow.
Not one of my favorite songs of all time, but the way Willy does it, it's pretty damn good. Now, after 3 years in New Mexico, Willy DeVille moved back to New York City in 2003. He would marry Nina Legawall. She was his third wife. He continued touring Europe, usually playing music festivals in the summer. On Mardi Gras Day in 2008, Willy released his 16th album called Pistola, which proved to be another album of honesty and self-reflection. Willy DeVille...
Pistola means, right?
Pistol?
Yeah, pistol.
Pistol, yeah. That would prove to be another, self-reflective album. He was still confronting his demons at that point. John Philip Shinali produced the album and once again was recorded in Los Angeles. Critically, Pistola was well received. Many consider it to be his best. I would put it up there in that. Sadly, it would be his last record. Wow. In February of 2009, Willy DeVille was diagnosed with hepatitis C due to his years of heroin addiction, I'm sure. And in May of that year, discovered pancreatic cancer. The doctors discovered it while they were treating him for Hep C. Pancreatic cancer, especially in those days, was uncurable pretty much. He would pass away in New York City in the late hours of August 6th, 2009. 3 weeks shy of his 59th birthday. He had moved back to New York in that last couple of years. And sadly died in the city that he loved and where he got started. Yeah. Okay, so now would be a good time to introduce our guest, Donna Destri. Let's bring her on. Talk a little bit about Willy DeVille. Welcome, everybody, to the second part of our Willy DeVille episode. Tonight we have the special guest, Donna Destri. How you doing, Donna?
I'm great, thanks.
Okay. She's an authority on Willy, somewhat. She lived through the period and saw him many times. You might know Donna from a bunch of Danny Garcia movies that are out there now. Yeah, there's Willy again. Wow. And Donna has done most recently the nightclubbing, The Birth of Punk in New York, which you can get on Amazon now as on DVD. And hopefully by the time this is aired, maybe even streaming as well. So take a look at that. It's a great movie. Donna, now I met you at the screening for the movie at Coney Island, at the Coney Island Festival. And you said something very interesting that really just it intrigued me, because I've been trying to get something going on a Willy DeVille show for a while. You said that you thought that Willy really should have been so much bigger than what he was.
Yeah, I always thought that.
Yeah, why do you feel that way?
Well, I don't know. Like the first time I saw them, it was life-changing. He was magical on stage. And not only him, but the musicians were, I'm not saying that people couldn't play during that time, because there were a lot of fine musicians, don't get me wrong.
Right.
But these guys were awesome. They were the real deal, and when Willy came out with his purple shirt and his skinny tie, and it was Bernardo, West Side Story, there he was,
right,
personified. He was the coolest guy I had ever seen, and that band was just smoking. Every song on that first album was great. I mean, every song. every song. So, you know, bands like the B-52s and Blondie and Talking Heads, they all did very, very well. And in my opinion, humble as it may be, I think Mink DeVille were the band of that time.
Wow. Now, you saw them mostly at Max's, I'm assuming?
I saw them at Mother's. I saw them at CBGB's. I saw them at Max's. I went to see them whenever I could.
Wow.
They would
How many times do you think you saw them?
Oh God, probably every show. Probably almost every show. Yeah.
Yeah, that first album, Cabaret, is
my
always, it's always on my playlist. There's a track from it somewhere all the time.
It's just so good. I mean, just such great tracks. And you know what floored me more than anything about him was the voice. You know, the soul in his voice was just amazing.
He was very unique in that period.
During
considering
that time, he was, because we had all these punk bands like the Ramones and, you know, the Testers and all those, you know, punky bands. And then you had like party bands like B-52s and Blondie with their little pop songs. And here was this R&B soul singer. I mean, he was just so moving. It was amazing. He was amazing.
Now, guys like I mean, the other bands, maybe, you know, the Ramones or even like Johnny Thunders, you know, what did they think of Willy?
Okay, I was with Jerry Nolan one night at Mother's, and he said to me, I think that might have been the first time I ever saw Mink DeVille. I'm not sure. I don't remember. Right. My memory's kind of sketchy. But
well, Mother's was probably early because it was gone after a while, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I remember Jerry Nolan saying to me, "Watch this guy. Just watch this guy. He's the coolest." Like they idolized him.
Yeah.
You know, all the Heartbreakers were there and they watched Willy. They idolized him. But I remember, you know, seeing Willy and thinking the same thing I thought when I first saw Debbie Harry was like, this girl's going to be a star, you know? And I just thought that about Willy. And just so disappointing that they had to go to Europe to, you know, to get famous. It just, I never understood it. I really never understood it.
I said something, I think it was in the first part of our series this month on it. I don't know, maybe this is controversial, but I'm going to just get your opinion on it. I kind of thought that, I always think that he's kind of like what Bruce Springsteen always wanted to be.
Oh, I think Bruce Springsteen probably took a lot from Willy DeVille.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Springsteen was paying attention to what was going on in those days, and he did check out the scene. So I'm sure he did. But I always felt like, you know, and not a big shot at Bruce, but I mean, it's like the roots, American roots music that Willy was doing. He was drawing back from the early 60s, but putting a modern twist on it and just having this incredible backup band. I just think he blew away almost everything Springsteen did at that time, to be honest.
I know it's going to sound sacrilegious, but I'm not a huge Springsteen fan.
No, I'm not either. You know, I know people love him, but yeah.
You know, so what?
All right, so we'll crap on him a little bit. Yeah, I just think he's kind of like everything that Bruce wanted to be, you know, and just never achieved.
Yeah,
you know,
but you know, even through all his incarnations, he kept getting better and better, you know, and doing more experimenting and doing more different things. Like I love the Cajun things he did, and
he had like 3 periods basically, like the Bernardo West Side Story look, okay, that you love, and then he had this kind of like he moved down to New Orleans. He had this like voodoo Creole kind of influence going on. He was playing more with Dr. John and getting immersed into that, and then he has that Southwest Native American period where he's wearing a mohawk, basically. Yeah.
But when he's in that, you know, that ruffle kind of shirt, French Cajun look. Are you familiar with Anne Rice books at all?
Oh yeah, sure, definitely.
I always thought, you know, she did that whole series about the witches. I always thought Willy would be perfect to play like Uncle Justin, you know.
Yes.
The witchy ghost.
Yes.
You know,
yes.
Yeah.
Right. Like the cover of the cover of Loop Guru when
Yes.
he's right on St. Peter Street. I think he lived right there, and you know, he's wearing like the long coat and the hat, and you know, and
That's fantastic.
yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing.
You're such a style icon too, you know. And I always say they never gave Johnny Dunders credit for that either. It's always about the drugs, and they never, you know, give these guys credit for their incredible style.
Yeah, and also you know, you mentioning Johnny. I mean, it's interesting how, you know, Johnny unfortunately passed away in New Orleans, and Willy was right there, practically down the block living. He didn't even know he was in town.
Yeah.
And, you know, you think like the big what if, you know, what if they could get it together and actually maybe even, I don't know if they were going to perform together, but it would have been cool if they could have done something like that.
It would have been great. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because I think Johnny was looking to change his sound, be more bluesy, and he was, you know, in the perfect place to do that. If he could have connected with Willy, that would have been amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, you know, Willy has this this very brief period where he almost breaks through in the United States. I'm talking about when he got involved with Mark Knopfler, Dire Straits.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
the Academy Awards song.
yeah, he gets to perform on the Oscars, and you know, that's probably the most exposure he ever had in the United States, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's too bad.
It's very sad. It's a very sad thing, you know, that people have to go to Europe to, you know, for them to be recognized, you know, like it happened with Robert Frost. He was never famous in this country. He had to go to England, and, you know, I never quite.
Why do you think that is? You know, because we find that happens so much with people we talk about, especially more underground people. You know, why do you think that is, that Americans just don't pick up on that?
Well, I think, you know, it's easier to break through in Europe because, you know, look at the BBC. What are there, 3 radio stations? It's a much smaller area. You know, here it's so diverse and the country's so big.
True.
And, you know, I think it's easier over there. But
I believe that, but I think it's also, there's a little percentage of it that is, they're more accepting of people. Yeah, more open to new kinds of musical sounds, styles. People that I think that they like something that's considered like almost like a rebellious or an outlaw kind of image from here, you know.
Yeah. Well, they, you know, especially in England, they love all things New York, you know.
Yeah.
The last time I was in London, I went through Camden Market and they're playing the New York Dolls like out in the street. It was crazy, you know. They love all things New York.
That's true.
So, you know, an American. So,
I also think that the European got better taste in music than a lot of Americans.
They probably do.
They accept the music.
They probably do. You know.
I mean, Willy was top 40 in France.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, and I've got friends on Facebook that when they heard I was doing this, they were very happy. They're from France, and they're like, you know, we look at him as like a hero.
Yeah.
You know,
He
even today.
Japan, right?
I think he played there. I think he did play there maybe once or twice. I don't think he really got there too much.
They will love him too because Japan loves anything American. Like anything.
Japan, they love everything American.
Yeah. It's very difficult. It's very difficult for non-mainstream artists to do an Asian tour. It's very hard to get to Japan if you haven't actually, you know, if you don't have a lot of backing, you know. And I mean, there was a point where Willy was in the early 80s. He was just he was still using the Mink DeVille name, but it was really just him.
Yeah.
And he had he would just do, you know, grab up whatever musicians he could wherever he could.
But he always found really top musicians.
Yes.
He always
I
found
knew you were going to say that. Yeah.
really good players. You know, they were like really good session guys. They were no joke.
Yeah.
You know, they were no joke. But yeah, it's a sad story about him. You know, I never understood it.
Did you get to know him at all, or just really from afar?
I just kind of, well, you know, I'm not going to lie. I had a huge crush on him, but Toots
I
was
kind of
never-
figured that.
she was never far away. You know, you just did not get near Willie. And it's funny
Wow.
because when I first got on Facebook, I made friends with Manfred, the drummer, you know,
Yes.
and he would laugh about it. And he would say, "Oh, Willie would have loved you, but you could never get past her." You know, she was always looming close by, and she was one scary character.
We're talking about Toots, right?
Toots, yeah.
Yeah.
Toots was always hovering. You
She
know.
was the gatekeeper.
Oh my God. You know, she was one of those like 19 kind of 50s looking girls, the ones who had razor blades in their hair. You know, you just didn't go near her.
She, if you look at old pictures of her, she's kind of got like, you know, an Amy Winehouse kind of look with a big bouffant.
Absolutely. She's very
Yeah.
cool. I
Oh
mean,
yeah, no, she looked very cool. I wonder if Amy Winehouse even knew who she was.
she probably did. But
Yeah, you never know.
You never got close to Willie. You never went there.
Yeah, yeah. Were you in the circle at all, like when he passed away? Because he did die in New York City.
No.
Um,
No. You know, about that time, I was, you know, I had a kid. I was home. I wasn't really, you know, I stopped my going out in the early 80s because, you know, I got married. I had a child. So I wasn't really in the loop. at
yeah,
that
by
time.
2009, that's when he passed.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's that story.
But
Okay, so-
yeah, by the 80s, I was like, not going to, you know, it's funny in New York because you had Max's, you had CBGBs, even Mother's. Those places were like neighborhood pubs. You can go out any night. I never felt weird going into Max's or CBGB's alone because there would always be somebody I knew. But then in the early 80s, those big clubs came like Hurrah and the
Danceteria, all that.
and the whole scene completely changed.
Yeah, and
Completely changed.
I missed your scene by a few years. I came around 83, 84 onto the
Okay.
scene, and you know, you're right. It was those big clubs. It was the Ritz,
The Ritz, Hurrah,
Yeah.
you know, Superior.
CB's managed to hold on for a long time.
Yeah.
And I admit, I lived there for a while in the 80s, practically, you know, hardcore shows and things like that I was really into.
Yeah.
But, you know, even going back to then, I mean, I knew and I heard, because I hung out with a lot of older people, and I heard about 10 years earlier what was going on, you know, and
it's incredible.
yeah, I mean, the history of it all, you know, it's amazing.
Yeah, you'd walk from Max's to CBGB's and back again and go see this band and walk back and see another band. It was nuts, you know. So
Did you work at Max's, Donna?
I worked at Max's. Yeah, I worked at Max's.
Wow.
It's funny, in the daytime in the restaurant downstairs.
Okay, you weren't upstairs.
Which was a whole different scene, you know. It was like a businessman lunch. And I'd go home, change my clothes, and go back and go upstairs and hang out. It was funny.
Wow.
I had my meals there. I mean, it was great.
Yeah, you must have seen a lot.
Oh, yeah. Every band that went in there, you know, we got to meet every band that went in there because they'd come through the restaurant. Tommy and Laura Dean would put a buffet out for the bands, and, you know, we'd hang out. It was very, very fun time.
Yeah.
Were you
But
there
Willie, I never got
Sid
close to
Vicious?
Willie DeVille. Sid Vicious?
What did you say,
were
Rob?
when Sid Vicious played?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
What'd you think of the performance?
Well, I'm not a fan. That's all I could say.
No, I get that, but you know, when we were at the premiere, the first premiere, you weren't at that. Danny played the Sid Vicious, you know, short Sid Vicious documentary that he put together about the very last show.
I mean, they didn't sound bad, you know.
I'll be honest with you. I mean, I grew up with those, you know, Sid Sings, that record, and you know, a couple of the other bootlegs, and what Danny had was the best I'd ever heard.
It didn't sound bad.
Ever.
I just never liked him personally.
But he was a mess. You know, let's tell it like it is. He was a mess.
Yeah, I didn't like him personally. He was a nasty piece of work, as far as I'm concerned. So that kind of taints my feeling about his music.
Sure.
You know.
Definitely. Now, getting back to Willie for 1 minute, and how he kind of was different than everybody else. How do you think he felt about maybe the bands around him? Like he didn't want to get lumped in with them, right?
Oh no, I love that line that he said, they call me a punk. A punk is somebody who picks a fight and doesn't show up. I'll never forget that line.
Johnny Thunders felt the same way. He didn't want to be lumped in with that.
Be called a punk. They didn't want to be punks.
The connotation wasn't good. You know,
No,
it didn't mean what they were trying to say it meant, you know?
No, not knowing him personally, but knowing Manfred, I think they wanted to be a step above that. And they certainly were, you know?
Yeah.
They certainly were in a 3-chord wonder band, you know?
Yeah. I'm hoping that some record company is going to do something with Willie. Okay.
Like
re-release, put out, there's got to be material out there that's never been released, or definitely remaster things.
Yeah.
You know,
what about this documentary? I mean, I'd be interested to see the documentary that they.
I've heard there's something. I don't know the details on it. What do you know about it?
Yeah, I don't know much. I know it's in the works, or I don't know if it's in the can, but you know, there's certainly interesting things about his personal life, you know.
Yeah. Wow. He had a lot of tragedy. Other than
kills herself.
Right. He found her hanging and all that, and had to deal with that.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you know, we're talking about Toots. And but even before that, Donna, you know, even like the life he had as a teenager. Okay. He was growing up in Connecticut, Stamford, Connecticut, which was kind of a tough place. Yeah. And, you know, he didn't fit in. He wasn't into the whole 60s counterculture thing. You know, he wasn't a hippie. He was listening to the Drifters when that stuff was when that stuff was old already. Yeah. Yep. You know, and he was attracted to New York City, which probably led to, you know, bad habits. But he would, you know, and he got it, and he seemed to have one thing, and of course I didn't know him, you didn't know him, but he always seemed to have this drive to keep going despite these things.
Yeah.
He had a bad
music. He always created great music, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he had a bad heroin habit, which he eventually would beat by the turn of the like around the year 2000 or so. Okay.
That was epidemic back then.
Oh yeah. No, so many people.
Heroin use was insane at that time, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Luckily he you know, he got out of that.
Yeah. And he managed to make some incredible albums even after that, you know. So it really, his whole thing wasn't about drugs at all. It was just something that he got hooked into. But this drive that he had to keep going, and he didn't always have an American record deal, you know. He always had the European one, and then sometimes I think it's with the third record, Le Chat Bleu. Okay.
Beautiful record.
Right. Beautiful record. It gets released. He's with Capitol. It gets released in France only because he added an accordion player to the band, and they felt they couldn't market it, that no one would listen to that.
Crazy.
Right. So, I mean, this is the kind of crap that you got to put up with record companies. But then it gets released in France and other places in Europe, does very well. It's selling as an import in America, and it's doing fantastic as an import. So people are paying more for it. I used to buy imports. It would cost $30 sometimes, and this was 35 years ago, you know. But just to show, I mean, he really, you know, he had a following, and
don't you miss buying albums?
I do.
Liner notes and vinyl.
Yep, I do. Yeah. I still buy. I mean, vinyl's out there. I buy it. Okay. It's to be honest with you, the quality of the vinyl right now is about as best as I've ever seen it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love vinyl.
You know, the sound and the physical quality of it. I don't know. In the 60s, the vinyl was very heavy. You know, I have like old Stones records from like my dad, like Beggar's Banquet. You couldn't break this thing if you tried. Okay. Okay. And then by the 80s, they got flimsy. And a lot of people never really think about it, but it had to do with like less oil in the world, okay? Because it all comes from petroleum, right?
Sure, yeah.
So now, because you got a lot of oil, okay, the vinyl they're making, it's like this 180 gram, and they advertise it like that, buy the Cramps psychedelic jungle on 180 gram, but the problem is they charge a lot for these records now. They're charging like
yes,
$40.
Yeah, I could imagine.
Easily $40.
But there's nothing like putting the needle down and hearing that first crackle on vinyl. It's
that
great.
First crackle, maybe there's a poster inside. You got the lyric sheet. There's nothing like that. Kids today, they don't know what they're missing.
I know.
They didn't have that.
CDs anymore. Everything is digital. Everything.
That's not how I roll. I don't do any of that stuff. Downloading, none of that. I don't do any of that.
But you guys want to hear something interesting? This year, vinyl and CD actually went up.
Really?
The most vinyls were sold, and CD was the second thing most sold. Like, they haven't done this in a while, so people are trying to get like players again.
Yeah. I mean, they sell record players in Bed Bath and Beyond. I've seen it. People,
funny.
Little suitcase ones like you had when you were a kid, like little ones.
Open the top.
Just like that. Just
That's
like
hilarious.
that. Yep. And they work. And also another good stat that's out there, I think for the last few years, maybe last 5 years or so, old music actually sells more than new music.
Really?
Yes. Now, if that's not a statement as to the state of things, I don't know what is.
A lot of new music is shit. I mean,
everybody knows it because they're buying the old stuff.
There's not much out there that's really great these days.
There's nobody that can fill Willy's shoes. I don't hear anybody doing anything what he's doing, what he did.
That voice is just. There'll never be another one like it. I mean, yeah. I mean, he's up there with James Brown and, like that kind of vibe. Awesome Wilson Pickett, like that kind of.
And if he was here with us, he'd say thank you because that was what he was looking to sound like.
Yeah, and he did.
And he did. He pulled it off, and that's not easy to do.
Gotta love.
Definitely. Donna, I want to thank you for coming on. It was fantastic. Thank you for taking time out of your evening and talking to us about the great Willy DeVille. And you have yourself, a great rest of your month or week or whatever you're doing.
You too.
All right. And we'll be in touch, okay?
Okay. Good night, guys.
Good night.
Have a good one.
Thank you, everybody, for watching the 2-part episode on Willy DeVille and Mink DeVille. I want to thank special guest Donna Destri. She was fantastic. She gave us some great information. And as usual, she did it so well. She's known for some great documentaries out there by Danny Garcia. Look for Nightclubbing. Okay, I mentioned it earlier. You can get it on Amazon. And also, it should be streaming by this point, I think. Nightclubbing, the birth of punk rock in New York. If you're looking for me, you could find me all over social media. I'm Rocker Mike 212 on Instagram. I'm Rocker Mike 212 on Twitter. I am Rocko Mike on Facebook. And of course, there's the Facebook group we have called the Rockshow Podcast group page related to this podcast. I'm on Getter. I'm on Truth Social. I'm on MeWe. I'm on Parler, all under Rocker Mike. How about you, Rob? Where can we find you?
You can find me on any social media outlet, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, pretty much on a multiple platform. That's pretty much the ones that I hit that I'm most active on. And you can also find us in the Rockshow group page, which is 1,600 strong and getting bigger and bigger. We got to invite people all the time. That's a place where you can discuss anything music, nothing else, no politics, no nothing. We just discuss music.
And the podcasts are there.
And Mike put the song of the day on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. So he's always putting some song of the day early in the morning, so you can check it out. And sometimes he put the song of the night. So it depends on what day of the week and what we're doing, because we're also running around like crazy people.
Yes, a bunch of savages out there.
So thank you for watching the show. Please subscribe to the channel. We got 3,000 subscribers. We're growing stronger. every week. We get more and more subscribers. So thank you for watching us, because this is pretty much it's hard work researching, getting the guests, getting the people to come. So support the show by giving us a nice subscription there on YouTube. All right.
Hit like and subscribe. Thank you.
Yeah. And thank you for the 3,000 subscribers. It was, it's like a big milestone.
Yeah,
so
we hit that over the last few months. That's great.
Yeah, that's great. So let's see what happened. So in that, Mike, what do we say?
We always say it. Don't get drunk.
Get lumped up.
Take care, people.
See you next week.
Yep.
Get lumped up tonight. Listen to Rob Rossi and Rock a Mine on the only podcast that I'll hear that won't make me wanna rip off my